this is our launching point to give you an idea about the online world. In fact, this is new to Dennis. Dennis has no clue what I'm actually showing here today. Dennis, there is a online biologist, which is not even in New Testament studies, named Jonathan McClatchy. I'm sure he's an avid learner and reader and an interest of New Testament stuff. I hear his dad might be a preacher or something. And that he says that someone who holds a PhD from Harvard, Dennis McDonald, argues that Mark and Acts are intentionally mimicking the Homeric epics does not render such a view credible. It simply shows that people with advanced degrees from Harvard can hold to really silly positions. Michael Jones, who's a well-known apologist online I'm buddies with, writes, his ideas are rejected by the overwhelming majority of the scholarly community. And by the way, I think that same potion there could be drank on his own channel. Several of the positions Michael Jones holds to is far from the consensus on Hebrew Bible and probably in New Testament studies as well. But I'm aware of, from talking to the Hebrew Bible scholars that I have on, that several of the positions he holds are far from consensus. But it's interesting, when a critic coming close to the resurrection or New Testament comes on, you find that the majority counts. However, we're going to get into this too. One more I thought was interesting. Oh, there's this guy named Derek Lambert who commented, saying, silly McClatchy, seem triggered of late. Several academics trained in New Testament studies and classics agree with Dennis that these authors are working off of Homeric epics and Aeneid. Consensus be damned, especially when they haven't even read his work. Your last rant on Twitter about how grieved you were that your scholars don't get much attention. It sounds like persecution complex. I think I'll make another video today promoting more of McDonald's work for more to look into. Mike Winger, a very well-known Christian apologist pastor guy. I actually had someone comment about this just recently in a video. They made the copying Homer claim. It was one of those days when I just didn't have time to respond and felt sad that I was leaving them in such a state. And my buddy Trey Brickley, he actually says, look, I love watching these guys go back and forth, but really sad. He's not happy with the way that the Christians are responding to the situation. Anywho, there's a little teased drama for everybody. And
he also went on Twitter. I'm going to show you.
Share yours. Yeah. Feel free to share yours.
It's the same thing. It's exactly the same text. Copy pasted it. But I also decided to chip in and give my 2 cents. And I bet you my life savings he has never read the material. And I honestly think that,
without a doubt.
And the reason why I think that is because they know that the Old Testament is being there's a mimesis happening from the Old Testament to the New Testament. They know that process is taking place in the text. So why would it be so crazy to think that the process of mimesis can happen in another text? And by the way, remember this, like, we forget this. There was no Bible yet. So these New Testament texts are not like, we're the New Testament, so we're going to stick to Judaism. We're going to, no. This was a text by itself, and it had a free range to copy from anywhere it wanted to copy from. All material is free game.
Neil, it's even better than that. And I'm giving Dennis the pat as we lead into this. Dennis is going to take the gloves off and go swinging here. And I'm glad. It's finally time. I think Dennis really stands up for his work. He spent his entire career mostly showing this eureka of his life. I mean, you want to talk about a born-again experience? Discovering this will blow you away. So Dennis, what happens is these apologists, just like a recent response from my buddy Eric Manning, who I would consider in that very conservative, needs this to be true camp. And he responded by playing one of the shorts that I've played. I like different voices, from Bart Ehrman, who denies the whole Greek connection. And so what they do is they find an academic that doesn't agree with you, and they latch onto it. So they found a list of academics who've criticized your work in the past, and they go, look, they don't accept it. They haven't even read it, but they don't accept it. This is so outlandish to them. What Neil just said, couple that with the fact that this is Greek literature. This isn't Aramaic literature. This isn't Hebrew literature. This is within the vein of Greek literature. That alone
Right.
should make anyone with eyeballs consider this and go, okay, so it's Greek literature. What they need, in my opinion, is training wheels, or they need someone to go, it is written. Therefore, because it says it is written, their job's easy. And they haven't really investigated that. That gets into some of these criteria and some of these particular issues that we're going to display, Dennis. So I want to put you on the front row here. Neil, how do you, there you go.
I got you.
Take us into it.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I knew that there would be pushback from conservative religious types, and I'm not interested in having them ditch their religion. I'm interested in making their religion smarter and giving them more tools to appreciate these marvelous texts. I would insist that I love the Gospels more than anybody I know, and they certainly love them better than people who are trying to defend orthodoxy, who really haven't read them critically, and they haven't read them in Greek, and they haven't compared them with the cultural materials around them. I was not entirely prepared for the pushback that I got from my own academy, and it has been painful. Now, I do know that there are scholars who are warming up to the idea, and I would be the first person to point out weaknesses in some of my examples. And I'm a pioneer, but I'm not the major settler. And so I'm waiting for the next generation of scholars to use mimesis criticism as another tool for uncovering the sophistication of these texts and how they mean. If I could give an image, I think that the tide is rising on mimesis criticism so that there is a kind of incremental appreciation for it. And I'm surprised by and encouraged by some scholars that I esteem very much who are warming to the idea and are in fact incorporating some of those insights into their own work. What I'm hoping for, though, is not a rise in the tide, but a tsunami. I'm waiting for the waves of critics all of a sudden to say, MacDonald is on to something. He's pointing in the right direction. There may be problems in some of his methodologies or so on. But to say that what I've done in my whole career is silly by someone who hasn't written my texts, my work, I just find that reprehensible. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I think it's too bad that McClatchy is a fellow Scot. The McDonalds and the McClatchys, I guess, are going to have a feud. So I've listed some of these objections in a display that I sent to you, Derek.
Would you like me to show those?
I think that would be helpful because I articulate there.
While he's pulling that up, I just wanted to say something real quick. If you're going to be that critical of another scholar like yourself, at least show the people why it's silly. At least say, hey, the thing he said about the demoniac, or the thing he said about the Euroclea thing, or the thing he said about Eutychus falling. Then it would show you read it, but he just went off and just said it's stupid without saying anything about it, showing he hasn't read it. That to me is embarrassing. It makes
the same thing happened. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's very embarrassing because these are the same people who want to be taken seriously on their undesigned coincidences. And so while they're screaming on the internet world saying, please take our undesigned coincidences seriously. And then when people do take them seriously and aren't convinced or have other alternative explanations they think are better in explaining the data, then it's like, okay, well, at least we're engaging. For me, I think what really goes right through the undesigned coincidence thing is the fact that this literature is aware of itself. These authors know the other works. Like, for example, the undesigned coincidence they bring up in Acts They pretend that the book of Acts does not know Pauline letters, does not know the letters. So how does it know this information? It must be historical eyewitnesses, or this author is really a true companion of Paul and didn't have his letters necessarily in order to get this information. So this is the kind of approach they want to take. They want to be taken seriously, but they want to silly your work to the side.
Yeah. Now, I don't do much with the apologists,
Right.
simply because I know I'm not going to convince them, and I don't have an audience for their audience. But I'm surprised that scholars in my field dismiss my work on as a priori without looking at the text either. So I over and over again, I've wanted people to say, well, how do you explain these parallels unless it's mimetic? Now, by the way, mimesis for me does not mean that people need to have a copy of Homer or whatever in front of them. In fact, it's more likely that Quintilian was right in having his students read a story over and over and over again in order to digest it, and then to pull it back as a cow does cud and chew it again and make it their own. Or like a bee that goes from flower to flower, collecting pollen that you can use to make your own honey. So that you have eclectic mimesis, that is more than one text informing a story. So I think mimesis means literary imitation, but it doesn't need to have visual immediate access to the text in order to be imitated. And in fact, it certainly is possible, and my guess is that it's likely in several cases, where the author is not looking at a text or thinking of a text at all, but of the Homeric story that has such cachet in the culture that he can expect his readers to know about it. This would be the case, for example, with Lucian in his satires, in my view. So I think I'm not interested in defending my work unless my defending my work makes the understanding of the texts better. I want the text to win. That's much more important than my winning. And you can't get the text to win if you don't read it critically.
Well said.
And so that's one of the things I was hoping that we could do in our time today.
Yeah,
is actually to take a look at a few stories and their comparisons, and to throw down the gauntlet and to say, do you have an alternative explanation for these parallels? If you don't, then I have to say that your denying of this is willful ignorance.
Ooh, well said. Well said.
Mm.